Today and next Sunday, it's a two-parter. So same bat time, same bat channel next week. So we're looking at biblical marriage and what God designed marriage to be. And, you know, we're going to hold up the standard that God set for us in Genesis chapter 2. And so we're going to read through that. And today we're going to look at what marriage is not, what marriage is, and if you've got your notes there and you want to follow along, you're welcome to. And then today we're going to look at 4 aspects of the relationship and the way it's been designed by God in Genesis. He's not just filling in space there. You know, I'd really like to just go from chapter 1 to chapter 3, but I'm going to fill in the space with chapter 2 and a bunch of blah, blah. Pastors do that, but God didn't. There's something in all of that for us. We're going to try to dig it out. Beginning in verse 15 of chapter 2 of Genesis, the Lord placed man in the Garden of Eden to tend it and watch over it. So Adam had the best career possible. And well, it was really the only career at the time. But he was given a great significance in his life because he had a role and a responsibility specifically designed by God. He found great a significance in that role. He had the perfect environment, the perfect relationship with his Heavenly Father. And so there he finds himself, okay? But the Lord, God warned him, "You may freely eat of the tree of the garden, except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If you eat its fruit, you shall surely die." And then the Lord said, "It's not good for man to be alone." Now, I know this, I believe this, let me say it that way. I believe this is a continuation of day number 6, where he told us, "I created animals," and then he created all man and mankind. And I believe this happened on day 6, because at the end of day 6, God says, "And I looked, and everything was very good." And so here he says, it is not good that man should be alone. So I think this belongs on day 6 of creation when he made man. We're just getting a little more detail about it as he gives us his design for marriage. So then the Lord said, "It's not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper who is just right for him." So the Lord God formed from the ground all the wild animals and all the birds of the sky, and he brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And the man chose a name for each one, and he gave names to all the livestock and all the birds of the sky and all the wild animals. But there was still no helper who was just right for him. He discovered something in the exercise God gave him. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And while the man slept, God took out one of the man's ribs, and we like to refer to it that way. In the Hebrew, it's really meaning from his side. It's not don't get lost in the bone or the rib. We have fun referring to it that way. Just like we say she ate an apple. We don't know what she ate, but she ate fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So from his side is the key there, because that's what it really is. While he slept, God took one of the man's ribs, opened from his side and closed up the opening, and the Lord God made a woman from the rib, or from his side, and brought her to man. "At last," the man exclaimed, "Woohoo! This is bone of my bone." She doesn't look like an elephant or a tiger or any other wild animal. She looks like me. I can tell immediately that she is my counterpart in nature. This is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She's going to be called woman, which in the Hebrew means out of man. So it's out of man. So she's like, and it's kind of neat, in the Hebrew language, man and woman are not the same word with a prefix. They are different words, but they sound alike. So it sounds alike, but it's not the same. Woman, out of man. And so he called her that. She'll be called woman because she was taken from man. And this explains why a man leaves his father and mother, is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one, because they were made that way. This explains why that happens. What explains why that happens? Because God is telling us, I've designed not only the concept of marriage, but I've designed relational needs that are to be met for that thing to work the way I've designed it to work, for our marriage to work. And we're going to be looking at those as we go on. Now, the man and his wife were both naked, but they felt no shame because there was no guilt, no guilty conscience, no reason to cover up. And even in a marriage, we find ourselves covering up. We find ourselves not exposing everything. And we live in a world today where we try to protect ourselves from being hurt. And we have a guilt about how our life looks. And it's very difficult most of the time for us to open up and just be totally exposed because it exposes our shame. But anyhow, we'll get to that. That's next week, okay? So Cat's going to come and help me, but I want to give you just a biblical basis here. So God's in the garden, and he comes up to Adam, and he says, hey, I've got this idea, Adam. I want to create this being that's going to complete you. She is going to say the right thing every time to you. She is always going to say encouraging things. She's never going to say anything discouraging to you. She is always going to sing your praises. All the guys are going to wish they had one. She is never going to spend money without talking to you first. She is never going to belittle you or criticize you. I am going to make her in such a way that she does not have the capability of saying, I told you so. She does not want control of the remote. She's going to be a good driver. This is going to be really, really a big deal. And Adam says, wow. And God says, but it's going to cost you. Oh, well, how much is it going to cost me? Well, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. And Adam said, what can I get for a rib? And the rest is history. No. I heard a bunch of groaning out there. That's just not even right. All right. Okay, one for all you groaners. God came and he made Adam and he formed him and he breathed life into him, and Adam popped up and all of heaven applauded and all the angels said, wow, that's amazing. And God said, I think I can do better. And then he made Eve. But anyhow. Oh, the groaners are clapping now. Yeah. Pretty fickle, aren't you? All right. Hey, what marriage is not and what marriage is, okay? So let's talk about it. There's a little graph there if you want to fill in the notes, if that'll help you follow along with me this morning. We'll do this, and then Cat's going to come up, and we'll have some fun together in talking through 4 of the pieces of, I'm seeing 9 very specific relationship pieces that God made and designed to be an integral part of the marriage relationship. Marriage is not, first in the boxes there, marriage is not cohabitation. Marriage is not just moving in. When I was a kid, they called it shacking up. That's not marriage. And my challenge would be to think about what message you're sending to your kids or your family members or those who you would name the name of Christ and would look to you and say, I thought you were a follower of Christ. Here's the message. We have a tendency to think that God is very important, but when it comes to love, there are just exceptions to God's rules. And somehow, because of love, it ought to be okay somehow. And the truth is, the message that is being communicated to everyone, instead of the one we would like to think is being communicated, the real one is this. I'm a follower of Christ, and I will obey him as long as I agree with him. And when I don't, I will do it my way and not his. And that's not a follower of Christ at all. That's someone confusing themselves with a follower of Christ. What marriage is a commitment. Genesis 2:24 is talking about the commitment that's involved in a marriage. You leave his father and mother, cleave to his wife, they become one flesh. It's a permanent action. That word cleave, it's the idea of putting together in such a way that it cannot be taken back apart without doing damage to both parts. It's kind of like a piece of plywood. It is glued together in such a way that you cannot delaminate that without it destroying what it was as it was put together. And that's the concept behind commitment and cleaving. Commitment is not like the Japanese kamikaze pilot who flew 13 missions. Stay with me, you'll get that. Commitment doesn't mean I'm all in, except right at the end, and then I bail out and go on home. A person who acts military isn't military. A person that wears camo and hangs out by the base isn't military. A person that goes through rigorous training like they do in the military isn't military. And that guy has no right to stand up and say, well, I am military because I acted military. In fact, I don't want that guy in the foxhole with me if I am military. You know who I want next to me? The guy that signed up. The guy that's all in because he chose to be. And cohabitation is not marriage. Well, we live together, so now I know what marriage is all about. No, you don't. Because you weren't all in. Because you never signed up. You know what living together is, but you don't know what marriage is. Okay? Number 2, it's not a homosexual union. And God's not just against homosexuals. He's against any kind of sexual intimacy that goes against the way He has designed it to be a part of our lives. That means heterosexual intimacy with somebody other than your wife. That means sex outside of marriage. That means sex before marriage. It means using something that God has designed as a beautiful thing to be the intimacy piece and the physical intimacy piece in a marriage, and using that or abusing that in a way that God hasn't designed. And so it's not. And we see in our culture today that there is a same-sex union going on, and that is not marriage. We're different, but what marriage is different by design. Genesis 1:27. I'm making you different. I'm making the counterpart to you so that all of nature reflects also what man is going to experience, and that is the perfect fit for his life. So the young boy said to his dad, I heard that in some parts of Africa, they don't even know their spouse until they get married. And the dad said, yeah, son, that's true everywhere. We're different by design. God's chosen it that way, planned it to be that way. If I should have took a picture of it. If I just show you a picture of our shower, you're going to see a difference. You know what? You know what's in our shower that represents me? There's a thing. It's called body wash. It's soap. It washes my hair, washes everything. It's just body wash. So that's my thing. In the shower, I got one thing. I shave with it, I got one thing. Kath's got more than one thing. Many things. And what is this about? It's like stuff you're supposed to eat. It's like herbal essence made from pure vanilla bean, extracted from fresh fruit. And there's like 300 things. Now, high maintenance is one thing, but 300 things. We're different by design. God has made us different. And when we choose to say, no, I'm going to resist, I'm going to ignore what God has designed it to be, I'm going to choose to believe that my life will be better if I don't do it His way, because I know better than God on what this thing ought to be about, and that's where we struggle. The next one, contract. It's not a contract. A contract is about how do I keep you from reneging. I want a contract because I want you to follow through, and I want some kind of evidence or proof or some weight to hold against you to cause you to follow through with your commitment. Marriage is not a commitment. It'll never work that way. But you promised. We don't hold. Marriage is a covenant. We serve a covenant God. And a covenant God does not say, if you do, then I'll bless you. And if you get yourself squared away, I'll give you salvation. A covenant God makes a promise that is irreversible and doesn't matter how the response comes. The Abrahamic covenant, the Adamic covenant, and the Davidic covenant. And marriage then is compared to covenant in Malachi 2:15 and 16. 15 and 16. It's the covenant is not. Here's what I'm saying is going to be my part, and then you tell me what your part is, and then let's write it down and sign it. Covenant is, here's what I'm going to do regardless of the response. And that's what marriage has to be in order to work. It has to be 100% all in. It can't be about, well, I'm not getting what I want, so there you go. You're not going to get what you want. And if you'd straighten up and you were a little more complimentary about me, I might be a little more. That's contract, and marriage is not a contract. It's a covenant. I've seen couples' marriages who were shattered. I'm talking about years ago. People aren't even in this church. I'm talking about marriages that were a disaster. I'm talking about she's meeting with guys in hotels, and I've seen marriages like that, and that one be able to be recovered. Not because it was a contract, but because it was a covenant. But because there was something bigger than themselves. And be able to work through those kind of things. That is not easy. That's miraculous. But God can do that. And then the last thing, it's not domination. It's not somebody. It's not. We've been at it for 38 years now. In a good way. 38 years been married now, and I've seen young couples, and I can relate to that. I mean, I loved everything about her, and the differences that we experienced attracted me to her. And I said, I want to marry you, and I'm all in. And it seemed like just on the honeymoon, she changed. And all of a sudden, I spent the first 5 years of our marriage trying to change the things that attracted me to her. And I see a lot of times young people struggling with that about who's going to be into. And the fear is this: well, if I give in to this, I'll be giving in the rest of my life, and I don't want to be that guy. Or if I let him get away with this, then he'll just walk all over me the rest of my life. And there's this fear involved, and who gets to be in charge? It's not domination. It's not about that. Marriage is about mutual submission in Ephesians 5. And probably on week 3, not today or next week, but the week after, we're going to look at Ephesians. About God's intention of love and respect from Ephesians. She's intellectually, morally, spiritually equal to man. She is not physically equal to man by God's design. Nor do we have the right to tell God he messed up and we're going to change it. Separate but equal. I'm going to invite Cathy to come on up. I've already gouged deep into her time.
Okay, I'm just saying. I'll just use one thing. You'll be sorry. But I'll just use one thing in the shower.
Oh, okay. No, you can have as much of that stuff you need. High maintenance, but I'm just saying. Hey, I didn't know this until first service I saw this, but at the top, she's made some notes because...
he made me.
Yeah. She'll probably not use them, but she made them, so... and that's a good thing, too. But on the top is a picture of her mom and dad. Their wedding picture, and I just thought that was kind of cool. Hey, the first relationship need that I'm seeing in Genesis is this. He creates man, and then he says to himself, it's not good that man should be alone. So the first relational need that God designed marriage to meet is this one of companionship. So I'm not talking to people who are single by design or by choice. My mom raised 3 boys, as a single mom. And she'll tell you her testimony is, I spent 20 years single because my mission was my boys. So I'm not talking about there's some sort of incompleteness if you're not married. What I'm talking about is when you're married, in that relationship, there is by God's design to be these relationship pieces. We're not to try to seek out these pieces outside of a marriage relationship with the opposite sex. But anyhow, okay.
So it's not just about somebody to hang out with, because we need more than that in our relationship. We need somebody to go through the days of thunder, because we've had many of those. We need somebody to go through the sorrow as well as the blessings that life gives us. And we need somebody to share in that. And that's what companionship is, not just somebody to go to the movies with or something like that. So it takes somebody that knows us well to be able to go through those things. You know me well, very well.
You know me well.
So we were speaking in Haiti together, and Mike was preaching on Ephesians 5. And it's hard to be down there, one thing, because I have to talk through an interpreter, which sometimes Mike is my interpreter here, but down there it's a little bit more stretched out. So you have to say something, and then you wait for your interpreter. And then I was acting it out, but I was talking about the fact that husbands need to know their wives, and it's not their fault if they come in and say, they come in and they say, "Hey, honey, how's it going?"
Hey, honey, how's it going?
Anything wrong? Anything wrong?
wrong?
Or how are you?
How are you?
Fine. So I'm acting this out, and my interpreter is acting this out. And so I'm laughing. So the interpreter, we have to wait a few seconds, and then they start laughing. And so then they're starting to get into it. I look down on the front row, and one of our other interpreters, Stefan, and his wife had just been married like 6 months. So they were just about practically on top of each other, like all cuddled up. Well, when I said that, then he's like poking her. Like, it's not my fault if I don't know you. He's like poking her, and she starts moving over. I was like, oh no, we're going here. But the point was this: when he comes in and wants to know what's going on, and I refuse to tell him or to teach him about myself, that's not his fault.
That's what I'm saying.
But but here's the problem: he has a learning curve. So the learning curve may take a little bit longer, but it was just to encourage the wives that we can't hold it against them if we haven't taught them who we are and what we need. And so, in my life, I needed somebody to be my companion when I lost a child, when I went through pregnancies that were difficult, raising our kids. What a joy it was to raise our kids together. We had tons of fun, but there was a lot of heartache too. The death of two loved ones in our immediate family within a year. Marrying our kids off, that was hard for me. Loving on our grandkids, that's a great thing. Menopause, whew, it's hot up here.
And if anybody has an idea how long that's supposed to last, let me know, okay?
His is going to last a lot longer.
Forever.
Yeah. And then just about ministry and ministry life and what it means to be a pastor's wife and where the expectations and the anticipations and his expectations and what that means. But if I don't have a companion who knows me, I can't go through any of that.
Companionship is more than two people cohabiting a dwelling, living under the same roof. People today, husbands and wives that share the same bed, share the same checkbook, share the same home, watch the same TV programs together, raise the same kids, eat at the same table, and are lonely. Being around somebody doesn't eliminate. You can be in the middle of a busy airport and feel the most alone. Loneliness is about whether you're connected with those people. And companionship, God said it is not good. Look, if you're in a marriage relationship, it's not good that you try to live this thing yourself. It's not good that you're not connected to your wife in this companionship way. That you don't recognize the deficiency without her. Now, if you're single, you got to adjust these things. But I'm talking about in a marriage relationship. That's what God has designed. And that's where He has us. Look, if she's a completer, then He was incomplete without her. Huh? We're not there yet. Okay. So that's where I can do whatever I want when you guys don't know, but I can't when I have to listen to her.
You meant that in a good way, right?
I did. If I say something and it can be taken one of two ways, and one of those ways is offensive, I meant it the other way.
He called me, last service, he called me irritator.
No, I did not. We'll probably have to go back to the video because that is not accurate. So he said, okay, first is companionship. He said it's not good that man be alone. Companionship. I'm going to make a helper. So there's this relationship need that is inherent in a marriage, and that is of being the helper and what that looks like.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. I think to be a helper is just really, truly to surrender to what you want and just to help them in everything. And it's not always a big thing to be able to be a helper to them. It's lots of times it's a little thing. In my life right now, it's sitting on the front row for 2 services. Mm-hmm. I don't think I need 2 services, but he's asked me to. But he's asked me to be here for both of the services and to sit with him. It's not that you guys need to see me. It's not that it makes me more spiritual or that it changes my relationship with my God, because it doesn't. It's just one thing that he asked me to do, and I said, I'll do that. So I sat in the front row with him, unless I have a grandbaby. If you're here for the first service and the grandbaby, I'm back at the back with the grandbaby.
I can't compete with the grandbaby.
So, but generally, this is my
38
place up
years.
here because he helps me. And so sometimes the helping is just, it's just the everyday things of life. I hate to get gas in my car. So when the light comes on, I said, hey, the light's on. And so he helps me out and gets gas. No. But, so, I wasn't going to say that. Okay, go. Go away.
I love it when she does that too. Helper.
The light's
Verse
on.
18. I'm a helper. Someone has said behind every successful man is a good woman and a surprised father-in-law. A helper. Someone that is designed to complete that. Now look, this goes both ways. Men and women. Listen. Nagging, critical spirit. I told you so. You should have listened to me. Belittling, degrading, shaming, manipulating, self-serving. None of those things kind of lend themselves to help, do they? Because they're not. Those are about tearing down rather than building up. And God designed in the marriage relationship, there's a need for men in recognition. There's a need in women for love. And there's a need for the helper to extend that each way, to be able to help meet those needs in each other's lives. Look, being two Christian people married is not the answer. Because 2 believers married can have marriage problems. 2 believers acting like believers in a marriage makes it work. 2 believers not acting like believers in a marriage is going to cause problems. So it's not about, well, we're Christians, so it ought to work. It's about, do you live it in your marriage relationship? And if you're going to live it anywhere, it ought to start, point one, ought to be the person I've decided to commit my life to and spend my life with. It ought to be at home if it's anywhere. Look, quit trying to be the high scorer and try to be the assist leader. Because God has designed you with a desire to help and designed the relationship with a gap where we need that. And if you're not working that together, you're tearing apart the intention that God always had for it. Engaging life together. Anything else? All right. The third one there is completer. So he said...
that doesn't mean somebody to finish your sentences. Was that what you were going to say?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was. Completer. So it's not good that man be alone. That's companionship. I'm going to make someone to help him. That's helper. And I'm going to make this helper to be the person that's just right for him. The completer. If he needs a completer, he is incomplete without it. So God's to-do list on day 6 said, make man, and then the next line said, fix man, and then make woman. And he was able to check so he had to fix man because he made him in his image, that we can respond to God in a relationship. Completer is the design that God's made, that I am incomplete and she is incomplete. But in our marriage, we can find completeness. We can find one as we come together.
So in my life,
What you got?
completeness shows it's just that someone is there to care and help me. It shows it's the someone who will continue to help me grow spiritually, first of all, and to complete that growth. I don't want to stay stagnant in my faith. I don't want to be the same pastor's wife at 19 years that I was the first year that I came. I don't want to be this, my relationship with the Lord, I don't want it to be the same. So somebody that helps me complete that task is my husband. I want somebody that's going to continue to help me grow spiritually and to push me to be stronger in whatever area I'm doing or whatever thing I'm going to do. Whatever I'm going to do, I want somebody behind me, pushing me on and telling me that I can do that thing. I can get up here and talk in front of all those people. And I can say all that even though it's on Facebook and everything else. So there's somebody that's pushing you to be stronger. And there's somebody to teach me that love is the answer. And to encourage me in that. And even when you go through those valleys and those hard things, to teach me that love is still the answer. And to not expect anything in return. And then just lastly, that the dream of a vision of a life. You know, I love our season of life. I love our family and where we're at in ministry, and I love this season. But we're going to slow down one of these days, and that'll be okay. But I want a vision of life to still go on. I want to stay strong and finish strong, and I want him to lead and be strong in that.
I love our season of life enough to admit my age and be proud of it.
Yeah, not me.
Okay. Just checking. A marriage is like a puzzle with 2 pieces. I mean, each piece can maybe give you an idea of what the complete thing should be, but each piece is incomplete without the other piece. And God has designed it that way. That's not something, that's not psychology. That's not, well, here's a way we found to make this more manageable. God designed the relationship to be incomplete without each other and to be complete and find its completeness as we come together as a couple. And that's not to say that a single person is incomplete. That's to say when you have said yes to a marriage, by design, that dynamic is incomplete until you complete each other. Okay? A completeness. Okay. Number 4, there's a balance. So he said there's this companionship piece that's going to be met by the next thing I do, which is create woman. So there's companionship. It's not good that man be alone. He responded to that with making Eve and responded to that need for companionship. I'm going to make a helper. I've created Adam with a gap that needs a relationship that would be this helper. And so I'm going to do that. And I'm going to create a helper that is the same as him, that is designed to be the kind of help he needs. And so that completeness is found in that. And then there's this balance thing. So the story is, and I missed this earlier, but so Adam, God's not just filling in space in chapter 2 of Genesis. So he says, I made man, and then and it's not good. I say it's not good that man should be alone. That wasn't a mistake God made. He's just revealing the way he made man intentionally, with some gaps that could only be met by what he intends to do next, by filling those gaps with the relationship of a woman. So he does that in his idea of marriage. So he says, hey, so I created Adam. We're all good to go, right? No, Adam needs something else. So the next thing he does isn't just filling up space. Adam, I want you to go name everything. Why would he do that? Because he wants to use that as an exercise to help Adam understand that he is incomplete. So Adam, Mr. Elephant and Mrs. Elephant, and Mr. Tiger and Mrs. Tiger, and Mr. Horse and Mrs. Horse. And he realizes through all of God's creation and the living things, even plant life, pollinates. And so he recognizes as he names the animals that there's something missing. He doesn't have this counterpart. This, everything else has its counterpart, its completer, except me. And it says that. He says when he realized that, he says, and he gave names to the livestock, all the birds, all the sky, the wild animals, but there was no helper just right for him. Do you hear all the pieces that God put in the resolve with Eve? And so then God put him asleep, and he took from his side, took from his very being, the essence needed, and he made Eve just like he had made Adam. And then he brings her out to him, and he says, whoa! What's the first thing he did? He named her, because he'd been naming everything. And that exercise demonstrated that there's a male and a female, and there's a counterpart and a completer. And then he said, you're going to be called woman because you're out of man. And that's what woman means. You are the thing that's come out of me that completes me. And he recognized immediately what God had done. By the way, we don't have anything in Scripture that says what she looked like, what she weighed. We don't see Adam, God comes out with the big reveal. Guess what this is? And he knows, I know what that is. But he didn't do this. I was really hoping for blue eyes. I'm kind of into long hair. None of that even mattered. Because he knew there was somebody created specifically for him, designed by God for him as his completer. And none of that mattered. What you got? I'll sit down a minute. You already preached. So the next thing is the balance. He knew that he was out of balance on his own and needed that counterpart. Cathy and I, if you're familiar with, go ahead.
So my perspective on balance is I'm always the feeler and he's always the thinker. So in the case of emergency, I would be going, emergency! And he would go, let me see, let me get my phone. I better call 911. I think that's what I should do. So anyway, we look, and there is an emergency, but we respond to everything differently, and we come at it from two different points. And so early in our marriage, that created a lot of discussion and thunder and different
intense fellowship.
Yeah. But over the years, we've learned what a blessing it is that we come at life at a different way, and that we're coming from different perspectives, and we've learned to enjoy life, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. If you're familiar at all with Myers-Briggs personality inventory, we've taken several through our marriage years, and there are 16 boxes for personality differences that, you finish on a grid of 4x4 boxes. And this is the honest truth. Every time, she is in this corner, and I am in this corner. We are different in every of the 4 personality inventories and the Myers-Briggs test.
So when we would have a discussion, I would say, that's not right. Well, why isn't that right? Well, I feel like it's not right. He would say, you can't do that. I'm like...
Tell me why you...
And he would say, yeah, tell me why you feel that way. I don't know. I just know that's not right. So for a long time, we struggled with, he was right because he thought, and I was wrong because I felt. And it took us a while for him to be able to trust my feelings about things and be able to explain. So I learned, which is a good thing, I learned not just to trust my feelings, but to look at through a biblical worldview, to understand what I felt, understand what the Bible says about that, and then I could communicate that back to him and help him understand how I felt about it.
And I am more than willing to not only admit, but to proclaim that I'm a better man because I've spent my life with this woman. Because she's taught me what it means to, she's taught me about the emotional side of life. Who knew? The emotions, what's that about? And there would have been a big gap. And there's a balance. We did a little exercise. She was talking about when we were in Haiti. By the way, we've never done this here before, like her and I doing this kind of thing. But we did this in Haiti with the pastors and their wives. And we taught kind of like this. And so I thought, hey, why not try it again? So we did this thing with them about balance. You can take your shoes off? Yeah. All right. So if she sits down and I say, okay, you need to get up, but you can't use your hands to touch the ground. It's impossible. And without taking the time to demonstrate and for her to act like it's really hard and not be able to do it, go home and try it if you want to. You can't do it. You can't get up from sitting like that with your legs bent by touching the ground. But if I come and we do it together, I can't do it either. But if we do it together, I hope it works. It's going to be a really messed up illustration if it doesn't work. And there's the balance. God designed it that way. He designed it to be a balance. He said, Adam, I want you to understand that you don't look like anything else in nature until you find the balance of, in marriage, in that relationship that I have for you. God speaks a lot about singleness, and that's a different message for a different day. So if you're not married, I'm not. This isn't a marriage about singleness, that there's please don't hear me say there's an incompleteness in being single. What I'm saying is, in a marriage relationship, when you have said yes and you're in a marriage relationship, there are these pieces that God has designed in that relationship that you meet in each other's lives. And balance was the next one. Next week, we're going to continue. We're going to talk about, then shall a man leave his father and mother, security, cleave to his wife, commitment. They'll be one flesh, intimacy. They were both ashamed. They were both naked and not ashamed. Acceptance. We're looking at those other pieces next week. Are you up for next week? You okay? She said, let's get through this week and I'll tell you about next week. So I'm just trying to get her to commit in front of y'all so that... Hey, a couple questions for you to think about that we've come up with.
I think a good question for the husbands today would be, do you take an initiative to discern and act and meet the physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of your wife?
Wow.
Still, some of us aren't married, young married like Alex and Hannah. Some of us have been married for a while. Have we given up on trying to meet some of those needs? So it is, do you take initiative to discern and meet the physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of your wife? And then I think for the wives, the question would be, do I speak words of encouragement and do I speak words of encouragement and admiration to my husband? What do I say to him? What is my tone when I do talk to him? And I think that's our challenge for us.
Yep. And too many marriages are sitting in this place stuck. I mean, just paralyzed. If my spouse would change, my life would get better, my marriage would get better, I would be happier. And that is a lie. If you would change, you would be better. That's what a covenant marriage is about. I need to be doing my part. We have this tendency to believe the lie that says if it's not coming my way, I'm not sending it back that way. And walls begin to come up and division begins to happen instead of using those pieces as things that we need in our life. Guys, do I make my wife feel like she is a woman of great value and worth to God and to me and to our family? Just keep in mind, if she belongs to God, then he's your father-in-law. That's not just some woman you're mistreating. That's God's daughter. Wives, am I teaching our children by my example and words to honor and obey their father? And lastly, for both, do I demonstrate patience with my spouse in our relationship? Because I believe that God has designed it in a way to rough off my rough edges, to carve off. He has designed my wife to help my character. And most of the time that looks like a challenge. But I'm a better man as a result. 38 years, I wouldn't trade it for anything. There were hard times. I mean, to say, yeah, we have 38 years of a perfect marriage, none of you would believe that anyhow, even if I was to say it, but it wouldn't be true either. But I can tell you this, each challenge is about me having an opportunity and Cathy having an opportunity to demonstrate that we believe and we're all in with what God has designed our relationship to be and to do in our lives. It's not about what you get back. It's about what you put in. It's about a 100-100 agreement where I'm all in whether you are or not. And sometimes that's what a marriage has to be. A contract is this. You broke it, we're done. See ya.